Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 972. My opponent started off with e4 here, and I went e5, playing classically. He goes knight f3, I go knight c6, attacks my pawn, I defend it. Very simple, and now he plays the rare move g3. So this is interesting. After this move g3, at first the chess engine thinks black is just better. So that's, but I think that's an exaggeration. If you follow out one of these lines, like knight f6 to attack the pawn, defended with knight to c3, bishop to c5, bishop g2, and d6. Pretty typical moves, and all of them approved by the chess engine. We reach a position which is pretty much even. So basically what you can say about this g3 move here is it's it gives white a comfortable position, but probably gives black equal chances. So I wouldn't count that as a mistake, even though it's got a question mark. I mean, it leads to unique positions that maybe white is more familiar with, but gives up the opening edge there. And then I give it back with my move b6. So I just showed the correct line of play with this. Basically, bring the knight out, bring the bishop out, play d6, and you have a very solid setup there, and you're pointed at some key squares on the white side. So b6, setting up a counter diagonal. I'm trying to counter his bishop. His bishop is going here, so I'll put a bishop here, and we'll face off along the diagonal when it opens up. But it's a bit slow and not fully taking advantage of the situation. So white has an opening edge here once again. Let's see, he continued, and we're out of the opening book, so we'll just use this page from here on. So we did the logical continuations. He went with d3. He could have gotten a stronger advantage this way. So if he castles, say I develop, rook to e1, putting this rook on central file, and also he's preparing d4. So I continue with bishop e7, and then white plays d4 here. And this looks pretty good. I'm not inclined to take that pawn when he can push on and make my position uncomfortable, so I try to hold things with d6. He plays c3. And then, if you compare this to the game, white has a little more space, and my position is a bit cramped. So this is how white can get that opening advantage. And this is a decent position for white. If he had gone this way, I think white would have a good edge. Instead, he just went with d3, so continuing with his modest setup. This is a King's Indian attack setup. This pawn triangle here, the fianchettoed bishop, and then this line of pawns here. I mean, it's very solid, and it's playing for later activity, I guess. Anyway, I continue with knight f6. Interestingly, I could have played d5 here already. There's no harm in opening up the long diagonal, and often when you can get in that d5 move, it's a good idea. I wasn't quite sure about it just yet because this bishop is undefended here, but seems like that is just fine. Anyway, I played knight f6 here. He went b3, setting up the other bishop on the other diagonal. And since his bishop is going here, I wasn't so worried about keeping this bishop back and being prepared to break a pin. Of course, this is a situation where the pins are not very effective anyway, because if I kick the bishop with h6, it has no retreat square. It has to either trade itself off or go back. I mean, it has no retreat square that maintains the pin. So the pin is not really a concern. So putting the bishop on an active square, targeting f2, which becomes an issue later in the game. He just continues normally, and I play d6. Once again, once this bishop is over here, there's no need to have it back over here, so I can play d6 with no problem. I don't need to retreat the bishop, although there is a lingering concern when you have this formation of the bishop supported by two pawns, which is he just needs to attack it, and it doesn't have a decent retreat. So I do something about that immediately. He castled, and I played b5. So this gives me a retreat square for my bishop if he decides to come out and start harassing me. It's kind of funny to play b6 and b5, and I was really curious what the chess engine would have thought about this move. But it didn't criticize it particularly harshly. I mean, it wasn't the top choice, but it was one of the top 5 moves, and it doesn't seem to give up any big edge. So the game is in the range of about even, and has been ever since he played d3 instead of d4. And we continue in this vein for a while. Let's see. He plays knight c3. I go a6. And now knight e2. Chess Engine criticizes this move. It thinks knight d5 is the move here. So put that knight up on d5. I would castle here. He's always got this idea of trading my knight off if he wants to, but no hurry. And then queen d2. Maybe try and get some kind of attack organized. It'll take a while. He's got to move this knight out of the way and push this pawn forward. And at some key moment, I may need to trade that knight off if the pressure gets too much on the king side. But that seems to be the best way for white to play here. Instead, he brought his knight over to the king side with knight e2, but it seems to me his pieces are getting a little bit clogged up here. I don't know, maybe his idea is retreating this knight to d2 and then pushing the f-pawn forward. That's possible. But I just castled here. Oh, and he went d5. I guess that was his idea, was to bring this knight, d4, this knight back to support the pawn. But there is a problem with d4, as we saw in the game. So, going back a move or two, this is really, I guess, one of the turning points of the game. Things start to go downhill for white after this, and it really starts with this knight e2 move, which was preparing d4, I guess. And then the plan, well, we'll see. The Chess Engine is not really criticizing white's plan just yet, but we'll get to a key moment and we'll see why. Okay, so I can castle here. I did. He plays d4, and I took the pawn. It's also possible just to retreat the bishop, but that kind of, justifies white's play in a way. Why not open things up? And in fact, this loses a pawn. He's undefended his e-pawn. So let's continue. He takes. I take, he takes, and then I grab the pawn. And let's see, he trades once more. So you would think that white has just blundered here and he's just down a pawn, but the Chess Engine says no, there's actually a way to justify white's play at this point. Not the move he played. He played knight c6 here, but he could have played knight f5. And this just gets him the pawn back. The bishop and the knight are coordinating on the g7 square, and his queen is ready to come out with a very dangerous attack here. It's also hitting the loose knight and also looking at g7. So a lot of arrows on the board. Turns out queen g5 meets the threat of him bringing his queen out with tempo on my knight, just like in the game actually. But now he can grab this pawn. And then here is the funny line from the Chess Engine. The Chess Engine says black should, it's pretty dangerous for black having lost that pawn in front of the king. So the Chess Engine brings the game to a crashing halt this way. Knight takes g3, the sacrifice here. And after he takes back, queen takes, taking advantage of this pin. And then black goes for the draw with the queen going back and forth. So anyway, if we back up to the game, starting with that move d4 or maybe even knight e2, white went for this line, and the best really that he can get out of it is a draw with accurate play from black. And so if he didn't intend to go for a draw, he probably should not have played knight e2 and d4. You have to go back that far to really correct white's mistake. But other moves besides knight f5 just leave white worse. So he played knight c6, and I was still worried about the queen coming out to g4 and setting up this attack on g7 as well as hitting my knight. But and that's why I played queen g5. But it also turns out that queen d7 would have been a good move here as well, hitting his loose knight and preventing his queen from coming out. So I had multiple ways to defend at this point. And also just be a pawn up and have a good game. But queen g5 is a nice active move. These moves are rated all about the same, giving black maybe a 1 to 2 point advantage. And then so knight c6 is the first real mistake, you might say. Although the plan starting with knight e2 and d4, I would count that as kind of a mistake too, if you assume that white wants to win anyway. But then his second blunder, h4, and it's just game over, and it's just a question of how's the best way to finish it. So first of all, you notice that the g3 pawn is once again hanging because of the pin. This bishop on c5 is a real monster piece in many of these king pawn openings. That's why I like to play it out there when I can, and usually white's a little more careful about defending against these attacks. He went king h1, and now the question is, what's the best continuation? I did not find the best one. The chess engine likes this one. Queen takes h4 check. The king can step up now, and I was not too happy with this idea. It opens up a line for the rook to come chase my queen. Maybe the king can step away, although that seems unlikely. I think more likely he has to move the rook out of the way and then bring his king back via f1. But the move rook a to e8 is the chess engine's answer here, and it looks like this is just going to be too much for white with the exposed king and all of my pieces starting to come in. The rook is going to come up and over, and well, to one of these squares. And it looks like he's going to have to give up big material to survive. And notice that his pieces, the knight is kind of out of play over here. E7 square is covered, so it can't come in with check. The bishop is actually looking at my king's side, but his queen can't come over to join. And the rook on the h-file is not coordinating with the bishop. So difficult for white to get counterplay, and with the exposed king I should be able to finish him off. At least the chess engine thinks so. Anyway, let's go back to the game. I played queen h3 check rather than taking on h4. I wanted to keep his king down. And then I had the idea, I played something different in the game, but one of my ideas was to take on f2. So to do that, I would check once more, drive the king back, and then take here. And maybe I could have done it in the earlier position, but this works fine too. I haven't given up that opportunity. And this forces the loss of the exchange. He's got to take with the rook, otherwise, well, the king can't move, and nobody else can take the knight. So I win the exchange there and continue the attack. So that is good. But the move I played is nearly as good. Both these were pretty closely rated by the chess engine. One was 6 points, and one was 7 points, or 5 and 6, something like that. So this is still okay, but he does have a defensive move I didn't see. I thought I was choosing the stronger move, and actually, knight takes, that line when knight takes f2 was actually a bit stronger. So one idea here, well, first of all, I thought maybe he'd play queen to d5 to protect. I saw that I had this mating threat here, but there's another mating threat, which is knight e2. That's a mate as well, because the king has no squares, so he can't let go of the e2 square. But he found the only defensive move here. Maybe it wasn't too hard to find. You just had to look at those two threats, and this is the only square the queen can go to that defends against knight e2 and also against queen h1. And now I have to be a bit careful, but I'm still winning. Once again, I don't have to move my queen here. It looks like, well, there's this pin, so the knight can't move. But the knight can't be taken, once again, because of this pin. So nothing is hanging over here, and I could just play rook a to e8. That's what the chess engine does. So just bring more force. So that's the right answer, of course. But I'm a little nervous about having my piece pinned like that. I want to be able to get the knight out of trouble if it should get into any trouble. And then so I take the pawn, and I still have a winning position here, but it's just not quite as strong as bringing up more force would have been. And he plays knight e7. This is an interesting move. It offers up this knight, because I could just take it, but then he gets this knight and my attack dissipates. So this is okay. I mean, I'm still winning here because I've gotten so many pawns. So I have an attack. I do have to maintain awareness here that I don't get mated, but I have 3 extra pawns, and other than that, the material is even. and his king is still exposed. So there's still a winning position for me, and I could have gone that way, but it, it shuts down my attack and gives him some counter chances. So that was a nice move. I played king h8, just walking away from the check. It actually was slightly stronger, so the chess engine approved of that. And then I played knight f5, and so I do end up trading the knights, but in this case, at least, my queen stays active, and he's not threatening on g7 at the moment. So turned out a little better for me. Let's see, I continued with h6. I'm just setting up the check so that I can trade queens and have a comfortable end game here where I'm just 3 pawns up. An easy win. Strongest move is rook to e8 once again. Funny enough, the chess engine wants to play rook f to e8. It's not worried about queen here. In fact, if the queen takes the pawn, it just brings this rook back to defend g7. g7 needs to be defended, and then brings the other rook over to the f-file, which is now open. So it thinks that queen takes f7 there is a mistake after that, and so anyway, it's just bringing more force into the game once again, and not worried about queen takes f7. Interesting idea, but well, this is okay. The move I played, h6, and now we'll just go forward a bit because there's no big suggestions. I just keep the advantage here. I force the queens off, and make sure my pawns stay solid around my king. Let's see. Okay, rook d2 was a mistake. Let's see, just because of the fork that I got. He could have played b4 to kick my bishop back, and then after bishop e3, rook to g4, and then I play king f7. But, well, of course, this is still winning for me. It's just a question of how fast I win. Rook d2 is helpful because it gives me another piece, or gives me a rook instead of just a minor piece. So yeah, I thought I would just go up the exchange, but he decided to play for the attack with bishop takes f6. But I can bring my bishop back and defend, and so this is just not going to work for him. And now I'm a whole rook up. Yeah, so we went from being 3 pawns up. I could have been up the exchange plus a few pawns, but he gave up that, so I'm a whole rook up. Let's see, he went king f3 here, and now I just started going after his king with rook e3. I just wanted to point out one more idea, which is even better, is just this move rook f8, because this bishop is now pinned, and I can just take it off. So that would be a pretty simple win as well. But I thought, going after the king, I didn't notice that, and I went for the king instead, which is good. You can't really escape this. I double my rooks and come in like this. He goes all the way back to f1. If he goes forward, then the other rook comes in, and it's close to mate. Yeah, I think he will get mated over here. King will run here, and then the rook will come over and mate because the bishop is guarding the escape square. So he has to go back. And then I just grab this pawn, preparing to double on the back rank here. Let's see, he played c takes b5. I just took back, and he ran out of ideas for counterplay here and resigned. Anyway, it was a fun game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Oh, and the second game that I included in the live video, that was very straightforward. There was nothing really to analyze. In the final position before he allowed checkmate, he just needed to play pretty much anything else. And White had a slight pull. I had a positional edge there because he had allowed me to get in the move b5, so b4 rather, so he couldn't advance his pawn to c5. So I had a slight edge at the point where he blundered, but it was not a big deal. Certainly still a playable game for black. He just overlooked the one move mate. So that's the only analysis you need there, other than what I said during the game. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you next time. Bye.